70% of Arab citizens say that their Israeli identity got strengthened after the October 7th attack. 85% of Arab citizens oppose the Hamas attack on October 7th. The savage nature of the attack of October 7th forced many Arab citizens to want to distance themselves from many of the values that Hamas brought on October 7th, such as kidnapping elderly people and raping people and beheading people. Those are not things that we believe that should be done in our name. Even after the establishment of a Palestinian state, we are going to remain in Israel. Without guaranteeing Israel's security, there will be no peace. And we need to find a way to guarantee Israel's security. Without guaranteeing the Palestinian self-determination and independence and freedom, there will be no peace. At the end of the day, I think that the biggest misconception is that there's going to be a winner in this war. In this war, there will be two losers.
In this interview, we delve into the Israeli-Palestinian conflict from the perspective of a Palestinian citizen of Israel. Mohammad Darawshe is among the 20% of Israel's Arab population. When Israel became a state in 1948, his family stayed put and was granted Israeli citizenship. He has a unique perspective, and as one of the leaders of the Israeli parliament's Arab Democratic Party, has been in a unique position to help Israel's Arab population, particularly the Arab women. He's also the director of strategy for the Center for a Shared Society at the Givat Haviva Educational Center. I hope you enjoyed this fascinating and enlightening interview with Mohammad Darawshe. Thank you so much for joining us, Mohammad. Thank you.
Thank you, Adas. Pleasure to be with you on this show.
We had tried to get together when I was in Israel, but it was a holiday, and so Givat Haviva was closed. Do you want to start by telling us a little bit about Givat Haviva?
Of course, Givat Haviva, which you're welcome to come visit the next time you're in Israel. It's an educational center. Wonderful. It's an educational center established already in 1949, initially as the study center of the kibbutz movement. With time, it started accumulating other social issues in Israeli society, including the creation of a center for the study of the Holocaust. But in 1963, founded the first Jewish Arab Center for Peace, actually the first Middle East peace institution ever created. Initially, it started as an educational center, basically peace education, to focus on how to bring Jewish and Arab neighbors together using what we call the social contact theory to try to break down stereotypes, humanize each other, focus on trying to get friendly relationships together. With time, we perfected the professional work. We also started using the narrative debate theory, meaning dialogue, talk about the conflictual issues, discuss the difficult topics, and not just come for nice social interactions, but also for real dialogue on issues that we maybe disagree on. In the last 15 years, we're mostly using the mutual interest theory, and the focus is on trying to create programs that bring about more equal integration of Arab citizens in Israel. Our programs range from educational programs pairing schools and classrooms together, to pairing municipalities together, to working with workplaces and establishments, institutions that have Jewish and Arab staff, and try to make sure that that relationship works properly, and that also with the government, that the needed policies are put in place to promote a shared society.
We have to obviously address the fact that October 7th was a big heartbreak. The events of October 7th shook up programming at Givat Haviva Educational Center, but it also shook Daraeshe on a personal level. On October 7th, his cousin Awad was working at the Nova Festival party. Friends on the scene who encouraged him to evacuate said Awad refused to leave the people who needed him. Awad wrongly believed that as a Palestinian citizen of Israel who spoke Arabic, he would be spared. That turned out to be an unfortunate miscalculation.
Well, I mean, that's a story we're trying to overcome. But what happened is that he was a paramedic and stayed to treat the wounded until he got killed himself. Awad was 23-year-old paramedic, refused to evacuate the scene, and paid for that with his life. We're proud of his bravery and his actions. He died as a hero from our perspective.
Daraeshe points to the medical profession to illustrate the integration of Israeli Arabs into Israeli Jewish society.
Like him, almost a third of the medical staff in Israel are Arab citizens that are working in the hospitals and working as doctors and nurses. Arab citizens are 24% of the doctors in Israeli hospitals. Nurses are 44% of the nurses in Israel are Arab citizens, and about 55% of the pharmacists. So the Arab community is very well integrated into the medical industry, much bigger than our size in the population, which is about 20% of the population, but almost 33% of the medical industry, which continues to function by the medical oath even during crisis times like the war that we are having for the last 5 months. Actually, it's almost 6 months.
And he says Israeli Arabs are not only loyal to their professions, they're also loyal to their country, Israel. Though he says at times they may find themselves in sort of a tug of war type of situation.
Arab citizens are proving that they're loyal to their professional commitment, they're loyal to their medical commitment, they're loyal to their civic commitment and social commitment, not accepting invitations to join the war, invitations that are coming from radical Palestinian groups, but also managing to overcome provocations that come from some government agencies, such as the police and the Ministry of Finance, which are both headed by extreme radical right-wing Israelis that are trying to also drag the Arab community into confrontations similar to the May 21 confrontations. We're managing to walk between the drops of the rain. Not easy, but mainly there is a great deal of focus on the mutual interests that combine us with our Israeli Jewish countrymen, that it's important for us to maintain them even during such a difficult time.
I've seen you describe this in the past as having two parents, kind of you're in a unique situation. Can you describe the impact that October 7th had on identity, or if it had any sort of an impact on identity? You talk about not heeding the calls of Hamas, and then you have to tread carefully with some extreme parliamentary leaders. But what kind of an impact did October 7th have on the Israeli Arab population?
Well, we're always pulled in both sides between our Palestinian identity and our Israeli identity. I mean, we're Palestinians and we want to be faithful to our Palestinian people, and we support their justified quest for Palestinian statehood. But we did put what we would characterize as a firewall. We cannot cross certain lines in our support to our Palestinian brethren, mainly because we live as citizens of Israel and our civic identity is Israeli. And we want also to protect our civic identity and maintain it in a healthy manner, because even after the establishment of a Palestinian state, we are going to remain in Israel. Palestine is not coming to my town. Palestine is probably going to be, in best case scenario, within the West Bank and Gaza. My town is inside Israel. I want to stay in my town. This is my homeland. My family has lived in the same town for 29 generations. And for us, this is home, this is homeland, and we're not going to trade it for any political goal, no matter what it is. And as such, we need to distance ourselves from certain demands that the Palestinians might have or expectations that they might have from us. So we provide a lot of maybe political support for the Palestinians. We provide a lot of humanitarian support for the Palestinians, but also we know where to say it's wrong and we cannot do it. For example, 70% of Arab citizens say that their Israeli identity got strengthened after the October 7th attack. 85% of Arab citizens oppose the Hamas attack on October 7th. They say this is not the way to conduct a struggle for independence, not in such a violent way. The severe nature of the attack, actually, some would even say as far as the savage nature of the attack of October 7th, forced many Arab citizens to want to distance themselves from many of the values that Hamas brought on October 7th, such as the stories of kidnapping elderly people and raping people and beheading people. Those are not things that we believe that should be done in our name as Palestinians, as Arabs, as Muslims. There are lines that, or there are acts that we cannot accept morally, and we cannot accept because we are Israeli citizens and our relationship with our Israeli Jewish fellow citizens, we need to protect. So This is pulling our Jewish-Arab relations in opposite directions. The level of lack of confidence or mistrust between Jews and Arabs in Israel has increased dramatically because Arab citizens, although oppose the acts of Hamas, we also oppose the savage nature of the Israeli response. The Israeli response is causing huge humanitarian cost for the Palestinians. The impact of the Israeli attack is also something that we cannot accept. But we want to voice our opposition in an orderly manner within the legal framework, within the legal system in Israel, so that we express that we object the perspectives, but we don't want to bring this to a breaking point in our relations with the Israelis. So our identity is being actually torn into the opposite directions, our civic identity versus our ethnic national Palestinian identity. We're trying to maintain the balance, and the main point is to avoid violence between us and the Jewish citizens, and at the same time stay keen and stay honest in our support for the Palestinian big quest, which is freedom, but as I said, not in the way it was done on October 7th.
Darawshe, who recently spent some time on American university campuses and spends his job strengthening Jewish-Arab relations, says the approach that he's seeing being taken at university campuses is all wrong and not at all productive.
I think most people are stuck in narrative debate, in a ping-pong debate of who's right and who's wrong. And I think that almost all Palestinians can prove that they are right, and all pro-Palestinians can prove that they are right. And most Israelis can prove that they're right, and most pro-Israelis can prove that they are right. And this dialogue is basically, if it's done in a cultural manner, Hadas, can only lead us to one conclusion, which is agree to disagree. It's I think that the focus on justice and the discussion about justice is too absolute in the eyes of most people. Justice is not an absolute term. Justice is something that needs to balance with itself as justice to the others. The concept of absolute justice does not exist.
Darawshe also says there's no way to bypass the Palestinian issue on the road to peace.
It's not about taking sides. You need to take the side of a resolution. Without guaranteeing Israel's security, there will be no peace. And we need to find a way to guarantee Israel's security. Without guaranteeing the Palestinian self-determination and independence and freedom, there will be no peace. Many people think that you can talk about regional peace, you can talk about economic peace, you can bypass the Palestinian issue. All of the attempts have proven to fail. Bypassing peace is not going to work. The only thing that we did not really try, because we tried in Oslo agreements to start peace process, it was never completed. We've never tried real peaceful relations between Israel and the Palestinians. And that keeps erupting every time.
I asked Daraeshe what he thinks is the biggest misconception in regard to this conflict.
At the end of the day, I think that the biggest misconception is that there's going to be a winner in this war. In this war, there will be two losers. The Israelis and the Palestinians will be the losers, and they need to accept their loss, because their loss will allow them to focus on the future. And as long as you're trying to focus on who's going to win this battle or the future battle, we're just going to add more rounds of the current violence that will happen maybe not in 1 year, but maybe in 2, 3, 5 years. The source of the conflict is the lack of the diplomatic resolution for the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. There was the partition plan in 1947. There were other updated UN resolutions such as 242 and 338 that gave a more realistic resolution, and the lack of implementation is the problem. It's not the perception of who the Palestinians are and who the Israelis are. The Palestinians are human beings. The Israelis are human beings. They both deserve to have dignity and safety, and that's what we need to guarantee. To dehumanize one side and put the absolute justice on the other side, I think that's missing the point.
So how does Daraeshe know so much about building inroads? Well, he has a master's in conflict resolution, but aside from that, he has some real-world experience as an Arab parliament member. He says that he has had to make deals with people with whom he doesn't exactly see eye to eye in the Israeli Knesset.
What advice would you give to students that are trying to find a resolution, because they're clearly coming at each other like this? They're not able to talk, and a lot of people are just learning about what is happening now. after October 7th?
Actually, I did see it really on campuses, the lack of ability to engage in any dialogue. I mean, first of all, I do not recommend any narrative debate between groups that have never met before. It's important that people usually meet and talk about the human aspect. They go engage in the humanization of each other. They get to know each other as human beings. And that's a process that needs to be completed before you allow yourself to engage into narrative debate or into the issues that you differ on. But if you're already there, I think that trying to convince each other is the wrong thing at this stage. The maximum you can get out of this is to learn about the other, to understand the different perspectives, and to focus on futuristic goals of peaceful coexistence and resolution. But to go into this debate of who started the war in 1948, who started 1967, and keep going until these days, this is counterproductive at this stage, because you can also go backwards. We have a phenomena that once you get stuck in an argument, you try to go backwards. You go backwards to who did Abraham want to sacrifice. That's as far as we go in our debate, where, as I said, the maximum you can get out of this, if it's a cultural discussion, is agree to disagree. But if it's not a cultural discussion, it can lead to confrontations that would strengthen stereotypes. I've seen in some programs that have gone bad, in dialogues that have gone bad, people saying, oh, I used to hate Jews, now I know why, or I used to hate Arabs, now I know why. That's one. The second thing is that never do it on your own. You need these meetings to be facilitated with people that know how to repack such a heated dialogue. The unpacking of a conflict is very easy. It's very easy to start a heated discussion, and it's very easy to feed it if you want to feed it and if you want to create tension. The problem is what you call the returning home. How do you repack so that you go home in a constructive way for that dialogue? Dialogue for the sake of dialogue is not a goal by itself. Dialogue should be aiming for something constructive, something that maybe contributes to the end of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. So if you have a project that you want to support towards the end of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, then that should be your work plan, but not just the blame game. To engage in a blame game, it only strengthens stereotypes, especially during tense times. Tense times are not the time to do dialogue. Post-conflict usually, or post-tense periods, is a much easier and much better time to engage in dialogue. For now, engage in maybe only in two strategies. Humanize the other side, get to understand the perspective, the differences of the perspectives, just be in listening mood and not in combating mood, and maybe identify a joint interest. Maybe you will put some money to buy food for people that need food, medication for people that need medication. That's what Palestinians and Israelis need today. People that can provide immediate assistance, and not people that just can polarize them further than where they are already.
What advice would you give to people on college campuses? Because it seems like a lot of administrators are not getting involved in a constructive way, and there's a lot of chaos at some of the brightest, the best universities. I live outside of Philadelphia, and they've had a lot of strife on Penn's campus. I'm sure you've heard. What advice would you give maybe to the administrators?
Well, I would give them the advice that we're conducting of the programs that we're conducting with 11 campuses in Israel. Here it's even more tense, and we're still managing to keep it normative. The first advice is to allow space for students to express their perspectives, but in a respectful way of all other communities on campus. The second advice, I make sure that they create a proper dialogue, managed, facilitated dialogue group. Students that want to talk further than just to have a basic encounter, they should be offered this option, but it needs to be facilitated, actually co-facilitated. One Jewish facilitator, one Arab facilitator that will do the work in a professional way. The third is to restrict hate language, to make sure that whatever demonstrations take place, they should not go to extreme hate language, because if you poison the relationship today, it will stay poisoned for at least 2-3 years on that campus. Students have usually tend to stay 3-4 years on the same campus, so you want to make sure that you do not get derailed to the use of violence, not physical and not linguistic violence. Support taking sides also should be offered to beyond just your own identity or to your own original group. You need to be offered maybe panels, create panels and discussions of reasonable people from both sides that are coming to talk about the day after the war and not just the day of the war. If we only focus about the day of the war, we probably will disagree. And as I said, if in nice manners, it's agree to disagree. In not so nice manners, it can derail into violence and it can derail into a shouting match. But bring people from the outside that can speak about the day after. And the day after has to take into consideration that the Palestinians are here to stay, the Israelis are here to stay, and we need to serve the best interest of both groups.
You talk about some of the hate language. This has been a big debate also in Congress about what constitutes hate language. Some of the chants just turn the groups off. I've heard things like there is only one solution, Intifada revolution, people calling to globalize the Intifada. What do you make of all of these chants? And I've also gotten the sense that some of the people using the word Intifada don't have a real understanding of what it means to people who live in Israel.
I mean, there are certain words that lose context if they are exported. The question is, what are the means? So if the call is for violence against Israelis, I think this one will harm Israelis for sure, and second will harm Palestinians for sure. If Israelis are become more distant and distanced from the talk about peace, and they see that there's no one to talk with about the peace process, then the chance that Israelis will come to a negotiation table, and that if a government comes to a negotiation table, it needs public support. That chance will be reduced dramatically. We need to talk to the Israeli public opinion in a way that it will legitimize getting back to the negotiations table and not will put them in the defensive that they fear that the creation of the future Palestinian state will be at the expense of the state of Israel. I also hear the chants, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. The Palestinian demand, the massive demand of the Palestinians on the ground, is a Palestinian state in the West Bank and Gaza. So when they speak in terms of from the river to the sea, that means the elimination of the state of Israel. That means that you're forcing Israelis to be much more defensive, and you're losing the Israeli and even maybe on campuses the Jewish potential supporters for a Palestinian state that will live in peace with the state of Israel. I think that we need to think strategically, and strategically means that the end result, yes, there should be a free Palestinian state in the West Bank and Gaza that will live in peace with the state of Israel. Anything said that will try to damage that end goal, I think is counterproductive and is doing disservice to both the Palestinians and the Israelis at the same time.
Can you also elaborate on what you said previously, which is the importance to not have violence or to live in peace, to have safety?
Of course. I mean, there are few levels of discussion that you can tolerate and still accept the other as a legitimate person in your sphere. We need to be able to conduct disagreements in a respectful manner, and definitely not to allow those disagreements to derail into scaring and making them feel unsafe. I think that kind of sense of lack of safety will force people to close up. When they're afraid, they basically retreat, they pull back, they close their hearts, their minds, their eyes. They're not willing to see even if there is logic in what you say. If I scare you, you're not going to listen to what I say. My logic is not going to make any impact on you. Your response will be only emotional response. And the emotional response will be that you will not accept any legitimacy of any claim on the other side. The fact that I think when I talk to Israelis and I mentioned to them, and I mean Israeli Jews, and I mentioned to them that from my perspective, their lives are also sacred, and their lives need to be protected. They're willing to listen to me in being able to say to them that occupation is illegitimate, that the Israeli attack on the Palestinians today is also illegitimate. I can say that because I'm not scaring them. If I scare them, they're not going to be able to listen to me to whatever I say. If you want to deliver your message, you need to make it in a way that does not scare others. If you scare others, they're not going to listen to you, what you have to say, even if it's absolutely legitimate.
I want to point out that you're also leader or former leader of the Arab Democratic Party. Can you talk to me about some of the difficult conversations you've had to have with Knesset members and how you've been able to make inroads with them? I think it's very interesting because it can be we've seen videos, it can be a very volatile place to be.
Well, the plenary is very volatile. The backstages are less volatile. Most of the good things happen actually at the cafeteria when people are having lunch and they sit in the same table or next to each other on different tables, and most of the deals are closed behind the scenes. Unfortunately, the Knesset, the plenary, is usually the place where the cameras are on, and people tend to be very angry and very upset. It's mostly, I would say, show business. People are trying to show their own clientele, their own voter base, that they are trying to be, maybe through radical means, they're trying to represent their best interest. Now, I don't buy that. From my perspective, this is show business that is not reality. On the backstages, I think you can see, you can witness a lot of fantastic things that have happened. I remember during the time of Rabin as prime minister, he himself and his ministers were extremely willing to engage in a lot of constructive things that have changed the life of Arab citizens completely. The same thing also during the Barak government and during the Olmert government. You see that you can conduct a lot of business if you approach it on eye level, if you come, first of all, well organized in what you need to say, if you come with a focus on mutual interests. I'll share with you maybe a project that I presented to the government in 2007, a project to increase the percentage of Arab women in the workforce. In 2007, only 17% of Arab women in Israel worked. And the government was hiding behind a claim that it's a mentality problem, that Arab men do not want to let their women go to work. And we proved to them that it's really not that much of a mentality problem, but infrastructural problem. One, of lack of daycare where Arab women can leave their children and go to work. There only 3% of Arab kids had daycare, while 93% of Jewish kids that had daycare. We also proved that public transportation was culturally based. It was between Arab towns and other Arab towns where both in suffering from unemployment. Employment is in nearby Jewish towns. So we need to create new bus lines that connect Arab towns with Jewish towns. And we needed to provide the Arab women with good enough Hebrew that they can work in the Hebrew speaking job market in the Jewish community, and equip the Jewish employers with the cross cultural skills needed to be able to understand the different holidays, to understand the different cultural needs. In Muslim culture, for example, you need to sit 3 days for someone that dies in your family, but not only for first kin, but also for second kin. In the Jewish community, you get 7 days, but only for first kin, not for second kin. So the needs are different. Right now, during the month of Ramadan, the fasting month of Ramadan, I do not need the lunch break during in the middle of the day because I'm fasting. I need my lunch day at the end of the day. I need to go 1 hour earlier. So to equip the Jewish employers with cultural sensitivity and to understand the nature of the Arab employees so that they can create more accommodating and welcoming space. So capacity building in the Arab side, on the Arab community, and space creation, proper space creation in the Jewish community. That's how things can get done.
I love this because we see this a lot in America in multicultural communities where you need to have cultural sensitivity. It seems like it's a universal need when you have different cultures living and working together. As we talk about this, I am curious to ask you, what do you think needs to happen now in the aftermath of October 7th in order to find that common space, in order for people to heal and to come together?
Well, first of all, end the war. The war needs to end. To be able to heal, you need, usually this is a post-conflict event and not in-conflict event. I think that people-to-people type of programs get damaged dramatically during the war. We can see it through the indicators of mistrust and mutual fear. Just I'll give you, a couple of very worrying numbers. The percentage of Israelis, Jews, that said before October 7th that they've not visited an Arab town and they will never visit an Arab town, that was about 50%. Today, that increased to 81%. The percentage of Arab citizens that say they've never visited the Jewish town and will never visit the Jewish town was 24%. Now it's 52%. So the mistrust and mutual fear is at its peak right now, and mainly because it's affected with the events of the war. And as long as the war continues, we will continue to accumulate damage. Repair can happen mainly the day after. Meanwhile, we can try to focus on minimizing damage. Minimizing damage can be by asking community leaders, social, political, economic, cultural leaders to stand up and continue to talk about the need for good relations to be maintained between people, so that people at least hear the echo of the positive sound coming from influencers. And the influencers are not just the members of the Knesset and the ministers in the government. The influencers are the mayors, the influencers are the social media people. Anyone that can contribute positively, this is the time to contribute. That's why we held the conference on the 9th of January, inviting the key Arab political leaders, but also President Herzog and Benny Gantz and the Minister of Interior from Shas to come and make that positive sound that Jewish-Arab relations needs to be protected now, so that it can be revived and put on the proper track that is more effective the day after. The second thing is the role of civil society organizations. First of all, survive. Many organizations lose hope and collapse. Many donors lose hope and stop funding activities that promote Jewish-Arab coexistence, and as such, many organizations collapse. We feel it in within our organization. Few donors that are not well tuned to the real need today pull out. They basically say when the bigger sound is the sound of the war, the sound of peace becomes less effective. I do not agree with that. I think that our voice is needed more today because, as I said, de-escalation and damage control is critical so that we accumulate less damage and we have a better capacity to re-engage in reconstructing Jewish-Arab relations the day after. The third issue that I think needs to be done is and I'm not ashamed to say it, is to have political pressure to change the political leaderships in both sides, Palestinian and Israeli political leaderships, to bring willing leaderships to engage in peace. The current leaderships are not willing to engage in peace, and we need to be people that want to peace. We need to make sure that the leaderships need to be changed. The leaderships need to either change their perspective or be changed and replaced with leaderships that are able to bring about peace. So it's not just about bringing Jewish and Arab kids to meet with each other, and while the political ecosystem continues to be negative ecosystem, the political ecosystem has to change. And I think that the international community needs to come with a proper offer on the table and try to fulfill that offer, and not just to say we support peace. So we support peace needs to come with maps, with timeline, with end results in feasible timeline. Otherwise, there's so many people that are getting heartbroken and damaged from this conflict. They might be the next wood for the next fire that will erupt. The kids of those that got killed in the last 5 months, their families, they get radicalized, and they will become more radicalized if we do not offer them a political solution. And political solution is needed today and not once the war is over. It needs to be put on the table today and force the creation of alternative leaderships on both sides that will say yes, and not just the current leaderships that say they're specialists in saying no.
Yeah, I've seen that in Israel. There's a lot of protests right now in Tel Aviv, everywhere. There are protests both to bring back the hostages and also to change the government. I'd like to ask you, when you look at the political makeup of Israel, from my understanding, is the people that were most willing and wanted a desire to have a peace with the Palestinians were the people that lived in the Gaza envelope. And those people, a lot of people that I've heard speak are now having doubts, or some of them at least. How do you bring them and others back into the fold? How do you restore confidence of, I mean, because they were the most in favor of cooperation and coexistence.
Well, it's not going to be easy. It's first of all, they need to see that there is a Palestinian partner, a Palestinian credible partner. Palestinians need to see also that there is an Israeli credible partner. And we're not there yet. And that's why I said the current leaderships are not leaderships that can be seen as credible partners. We're seeing some of them are just with the mindset of warlords that want to keep the war to continue because they're benefiting from it, and despite the price that their own people or the other side is paying. One of the things that we've done at Givat Haviva on October 8th, we basically opened our campus for Bedouin and Jewish residents of the South, for anyone that wants to seek a safe place to come and stay in. And we ended up with about 300 evacuees that stayed with us for about 3 months. And they were very concerned about coming to a place that has Jewish and Arab staff, and they didn't know how to accept it. It took about a week for them to calm down and get over their trauma to realize that this is the normal relationship that needs to be and needs to happen and needs to be exercised. And they dropped their resistance to being embraced by Jewish and Arab staff and taken care by Jewish and Arab staff. Many of them were from the Gaza enveloping area and from Ashkelon. Many of them, yes, got hardened during the conflict. But if we go through history, if we go to the Israeli perspective on returning the Sinai before Sadat came to Israel, massive majority of Israelis, more than 75% of Israelis, were against returning the Sinai. But once Sadat was in Israel and spoke at the Knesset, the day after, 75% were in favor of paying the price of peace. Today, Israelis are hardened. They do not give the voice of peace any chance. And that's why I think it needs to be brought from the outside. It cannot be created from within Israeli society today. I think the US and the international community needs to put something on the table, but also bring the securities and guarantees that this contributes to Israel's security. For Israelis, the word peace means security for them. For the Palestinians, the word peace means freedom. So it's different values that are not in the same level. You need to secure both peace and freedom from both nations. And Israelis need to find, first, a credible Palestinian partner, and second, international guarantees that will provide that safety net for them to take the risk. Because today they're still mostly traumatized with the October 7th. They don't see what they're doing in Gaza since October 8th. For them, that is unseen. It's not on the news. They don't feel the Palestinian pain. For them, it doesn't register at all. They think it's legitimate for them to go as far as they need in order to free the Israeli kidnappees. And they're still in a mood of, many are in the mood of a revenge and not in the mood of engaging in peace. First of all, things need to calm down, and then we rehabilitate people's political perspectives.
I know there has been a lot of, we talk about the protests. On the Israeli side, it would be that people are calling for new elections. Then, of course, the question is who is going to be elected. What would it take on the Palestinian side? Because Hamas doesn't necessarily have elections, but what would it take to find that partner in peace, and who could it be?
That's a question beyond my capacity to really suggest reasonable answers. It's a changing, shifting reality, and it's a shifting target. The day after, you want the biggest amount of Palestinians standing behind that leadership that will be on the negotiations table. You don't want a Palestinian negotiator that does not enjoy Palestinian public support. So the question is, when would that day be? Is that day going to be tomorrow, when Hamas is still holding ground and is able to be competing to the Palestinian Authority, or is that going to be what President Biden calls rejuvenated Palestinian Authority that has more capacity and power to control the West Bank and maybe with time control Gaza, and can be seen as a credible partner to complete the negotiations package with Israel? Or do we need something in between? Do we need something in between that some outside force, some UN or maybe Arab force will come in between and create that buffer zone between the war and the negotiations. It's hard to tell what's needed. This is a question that needs to be placed probably to the White House first, to the UN, and to the big negotiators that they need to deliver a horizon for peace. Right now, there's no horizon for peace. Right now, the two-state solution is not on the table. The one-state solution is not on the table. The three-state solution is not on the table. There's no real solution on the table. So it's hard to come and say who's going to negotiate it if you don't know what they are going to be negotiating about. So if we're talking about one-state solution and Israelis are for it, then Hamas can be a partner because that's what they want. If we talk about the two-state solution, Hamas does not want its two-state solution, then the Palestinian Authority is the partner. And we need to empower it so that it can be the partner to negotiate with.
My understanding is, though, that the Palestinian Authority does not have the support of the majority of the Palestinian people.
That's why I said you need a transitional stage. You need a transitional stage in which maybe a new leadership will emerge. Some of the Palestinian prisoners that there's talk about releasing them in an exchange deal do have a great deal of public support among the Palestinians, such as Marwan Barghouti. And if they are released and they can assume some kind of leadership, premier leadership status in the Palestinian community, then at least you have a Palestinian leader that can deliver the Palestinian people, that can take some historic decisions on behalf of the Palestinians. The Palestinian Authority tried since Oslo. They've been trying for 30 years. And let's face it, they failed to deliver the Palestinian statehood and sense of safety and security for the Palestinians. And in the process, they got split between Hamas and the PLO. And that split basically convinced Israelis that there's no one partner to talk to. And that's when Israel started also pulling out of any commitment towards a negotiated peace.
Is that the goal? Is the goal to have two states side by side?
I'm not sure if that's the goal, Hadass. I think that's probably the only working solution. I hope that it's going to be two states that maybe can cooperate much more than just two neighboring states, but maybe some kind of federation or confederation where they focus on a great deal of cooperation and collaboration and really treating each other as two brother states or two sister states. My hope is more than just two states that have borders that divides between them. But it needs that, even in a divorce agreement, you need to go through the stage where you know where the house is split. Then you start asking the question, if the house is split and you have many children, how many doors do you allow? Does each room of the kids have access to both houses, or you have a hermetic closure? As long as security is a concern, you need separation. You need to separate in order to create the sense of security. You need to separate to create the sense that where your state starts and ends, where you need permission from the other side to visit. Today, there's no clarity of where borders start and end, where Israel does not have borders, and the Palestinian Authority is more like a Swiss cheese kind of a country. I think a two-state solution is a transitional stage towards a great deal of cooperation, but with respect for the need for independence for each state, the need for each state serving as the nation state of each nation. Each state has their own immigration laws, their own flag, their own national anthem, their own Independence Day. But beyond those kind of issues, I think the economy needs to be very interdependent. The environment needs to be very interdependent. Tourism is very much interdependent. There are lots of things that the two nations need to cooperate and collaborate on. So hermetic separation, I don't think, is in anyone's need. Israel needs peace with the Palestinians to fulfill its bigger goal, which is peace with the rest of the Arab world. And the Palestinians need peace with Israel because it's their bigger neighbor and actually enveloping them. And you cannot connect Gaza with the West Bank without going through Israel. So the sense of interdependency is very, very critical. So it's not just peace that negotiates an end of animosity, but peace that starts the negotiations of peaceful relations. I don't want between Israel and the Palestinians a similar peace as we have between Israel and Egypt. There, it's mostly lack of war. But I don't see Egyptians in Israeli streets, and I don't see Israelis in Egyptians' streets. It's a very cold peace. And that's not the kind of peace that we should aspire for. Maybe that's a transitional stage we need to go for, but we need to aspire and have and dream about something much more meaningful.
We have to address there are a lot of people that I've heard on college campuses saying things like they want everything like Israel shouldn't exist. Is that a legitimate call?
No, I think that the only legitimate call I'm willing to listen to is a two-state solution that live together in harmony, live together in peace, live together in partnership, live together in economic partnership. The Palestinians need the Israeli job market. Israel needs the Palestinian as a platform to engage with the rest of the Arab world. I think eliminating the right of the other to exist in their homeland is an illegitimate demand. It borders other descriptions that I don't want to use today, but I think that the legitimacy of Israel and the legitimacy of Palestine as two independent entities should be the only legitimate discourse that we should accept. Israel does serve as a legitimate homeland for the Jewish people. It serves as the homeland of its Arab citizens also. It has a lot of political faults in it. There is discrimination against Arab citizens that needs to end, and there's a lot of successful efforts to end it. Not fast enough, but it's ending slowly. But Israel also needs to understand that it loses legitimacy in the world with the continuity of occupation.
Can you please clarify what you mean by occupation? Because there's West Bank occupation, and then there's also people say there have been protesters on the streets talking about 75 years of occupation. So can you please just clarify?
Well, for me, I think that when we speak about occupation, it's the occupation of the West Bank and Gaza that were occupied in 1967. This is the area which the United Nations and the international law looks at as occupied territories. Anything that Israel was recognized in 1948 within what's called 1948 Green Line borders. This is the legitimate state of Israel.
My understanding is that those areas were never annexed because they wanted to use them as chips for peace, land for peace.
Well, East Jerusalem was annexed in 1967. The West Bank and Gaza are not annexed, they are occupied by Israel. But East Jerusalem is annexed by Israel in 1967.
Yes, of course. Before we end this, I would just like to know what is happening right now with Givat Haviva in this kind of post October 7th time period.
All of our cross sector programs in which Jewish and Arab youth met with before in previous years, we are back in all those dialogue groups. We have hundreds of such groups that are operating throughout the country, mostly between between schools, but also now we started with universities. So older groups, yes, we are conducting the meetings. We're not bringing new groups to meet. This we will do the day after the war. As I said, we do not believe in jumping straight into narrative debate. Groups that have good foundation in the interpersonal level, they can discuss conflictual issues. We do a lot of teachers training. One of the projects I started in 2005 was cross-sector teachers program, placing Arab teachers in Jewish schools and Jewish teachers in Arab schools. There are today 2,500 teachers who are working up in the other sector. We're focusing a great deal on attending to these teachers, to the principals, making sure that those teachers are equipped, them and the host teacher, they're equipped with the skills of conflict management. So we work a great deal with training of those teachers, basically maintenance of those old programs. We're going to have a graduation program of a program that we did conduct during the war. It's artists in residency, Jewish and Arab artists that freshly graduated from art schools, universities, and they came for a 4-month residency program at Givat Haviva, where they worked in the same space, lived in the same dormitories, and they're going to have a joint exhibition. Despite all odds, we managed to pull this program together even during the war. We have an international IB school on campus. 1/3 are Arab kids, 1/3 Israeli Jewish kids, and 1/3 internationals. This program is running 2 weeks after the war. All the students who came back, and the program is running as one of the best schools in the country. The kids, as I said, graduate with an IB International Baccalaureate diploma. We have an Arab high school on campus with 600 Arab kids. Again, 2 weeks after the war, they were back on track. We're working in 11 Israeli campuses, working with the administration, working with the students, and planning joint cultural activities for them. We have the biggest group of Arab students that are studying high tech on campus. It's a program called High Tech Seeds. We bring, usually in normal years, 100 Arab kids from 9th grade. They start studying computer science. By the time they finish high school, they have 50% of their undergraduate degree in computer science. This year, we started the program with 140 kids instead of 100. So there's an increase of 40% in this program. And we're getting a lot of demands to go and talk in schools, community centers, about our theory of change, the theory of change that bases itself on we use the term shared society and not just coexistence, because we don't want just coexistence which allows maybe hierarchic coexistence as coexistence between a horse and a rider. We want equal coexistence, which is based on good relations from one end and equality from the other end. So we're invited to give, I would say, no less than 10 talks a week to different communities throughout Israel, but also a lot of visiting delegations that are coming to learn the situation and learn about Jewish-Arab relations. We're working more today than what we did before October 6th, mainly because we believe this is the time to stand up and prove our concept, and not the time to duck and wait for that tsunami to pass us. Because if we do that, we will face a lot of damaged territory that cannot be fixed. We want to face the day after the war with more and bigger capacity to start the healing process. It will take time, but it will take less time if we are active today than if we go mute today and wait for the conflict to end.
And since I live in America, do you have any final tips of how to promote coexistence abroad, speak with each other, have conversations and dialogue, and be peaceful with each other?
My only tip is that try to be constructive. Look for a project that you think is a good project at this time, and be constructive and not be destructive. It's easy to be destructive. It's very difficult, and you need to be very creative in being constructive. But anyone that is looking for a constructive way, they can look at Givat Haviva's website. We have also Friends of Givat Haviva, which is based in New York, with the staff that is willing to engage in discussion. As I said, look for constructive ways to engage. Our team is definitely willing to be part of such a dialogue. This is why we're here right now at this time. This is why we're not ducking. This is the right time for us to be with those that want to think positively and do constructive work.
And I'll put those links in the description. And with that, Mohammad Darawshe, I want to wish you I understand you're going to break the Ramadan fast now.
Yeah, in about an hour. Yes.
Thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate your time and your knowledge.
Thank you very much, Hadas. And thanks to your listeners.
Thank you so much for watching. If you've made it this far, please subscribe to the channel and like. When you engage with the videos, it encourages YouTube to push it out to other people to watch. We really appreciate it. And if you have any comments or questions, I would love to hear them. Please drop them in the comments. And while you're here, check out the 6-video playlist of what it's like to be in Israel during the 5th month of the Israel-Hamas war. Thank you so much. See you later. Bye.